More wine. It was too late to do anything constructive. The essentials were unpacked, the bed made, the fridge filled with the provisions he'd thought to bring. He'd start to get the place in order tomorrow. Meanwhile, it was a lovely evening. There was a moon, there was wine, and there was the outback to explore. He downed the almost full glass of bargain basement red, vin rough, he called it, and headed outside. The garden, silvered with magic by the moonlight, looked very tempting, but would be better explored in the morning. He'd noticed as he approached the cottage earlier that behind the stand of oaks were meadows and fields stretching far into the distance. He plunged into the trees and emerged a couple of minutes later into the open air. After a couple of steps he stopped, gaping stupidly in all directions. Suddenly, more than a little drunk from the dizzying cocktail of coarse red wine and unfamiliarly pure cold night air, he looked out and up at the huge sweep of darkly luminous blue, which seemed to wrap him about in a great cloak of childish wonder. The moon, nearly full, was gigantically white. The stars were a million flawless diamonds, ready to dislodge themselves from the gorgeous velvet of the sky and shower down upon him in sparkling cascades of brilliance. He could imagine them bouncing off the ground, pocking the earth with countless perfect impressions, then ricocheting and tinkling as they flew upward again to resume their proper places. He was drunker than he knew. As if to prove it, a second moon appeared. But this was a crescent moon, and on the other side of the sky. It was also much smaller and seemed to be moving. Yes, the miniature crescent moon now visibly wheeled about and then plunged earthward. Briefly it seemed to have crashed and extinguished itself. At the same instant a tiny, distant shriek came to him on the night breeze. Then the moon swept back up into the sky, revealing for the first time the magnificent wings of a barn owl. Its hunt successfully at an end. Owl 1, field mouse 0, he thought. That thought barely completed, he was no longer standing stupidly in a meadow behind the hamlet of Hidden. He was walking with his sister and Teddy along a narrow, muddy path leading back from the stables to Kindrochit Lodge in Calvine. It was evening now, and he was 8, on holiday in Perthshire, staying with Mum's much older friends from her time as a major's wife in India, Teddy and Joan, who lived rent-free in the old hunting lodge. Teddy was taking them back for tea after their afternoon of playing in the fort they had created in the stables. The light was nearly gone, the trees were creeping closer and closer to the path, and apart from a faint rustle when the breeze tickled the leaves, and the gentle squelch of their footsteps, the woods had grown a little too quiet for a child of the city. He daren't say so, because his sister would only mock him for it, but he was beginning to find it more than a little creepy. And that's when he saw the thing. A speck of white in the distance at first. The nameless thing approached, quite high up in the trees ahead, but rapidly swooping towards them, growing bigger and getting closer, whiter and whiter, bigger and bigger, utterly silent apart from the eerie sound of the air audibly parting and vibrating as though in fear to let it pass. It happened in seconds, but felt like an eternity. At last, coming straight at him out of the night, he saw a vast, queerly shaped, snow-white face, with eyes like billiard balls and black as hell. The monstrous face hurtled towards his own. Just as it seemed about to smash into him, he let out a tiny, terrified shriek, and the thing vanished. At the very last second, it had soared up and over his head, back into the trees. A barn owl. It had taken Teddy the whole walk back to reassure him and calm him down, while his sister laughed and sneered. The memory of that uncanny bird was never far from him. It remained, in some way he could never quite explain, one of the defining experiences of his life. It was the first and only time that he had thought he had seen a ghost.